Ron Francis made some comments about the coaching staff today, but here's why I'm not getting my panties in a twist.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to a little bonus episode of Locked On Kraken. If you've already watched today's episode, specifically if you watched the video, then you know that I actually scrolled into by accident the Dropbox that would hold Ron Francis's comments from today, and I was going to wait to go over them. I've got a few things that I'll be doing in a couple hours here, so I wanted to wait, but I kept seeing some tweets and some things happening on the timeline. One is about coaching, the other is about defense, and then I'm also going to add a comment on what Ron Francis said today about the pipeline, because I think it fits with what we talked about on today's episode of Locked On Kraken, where you heard from Tad O'Had, who is the general manager and head coach of our very own Kansas City Mavericks, a part of the pipeline. And we've got both of our affiliates in the playoffs and no Seattle Kraken in the playoffs. So I have some thoughts. The first thing that I really want to clear up, and I think it's interesting because Ron Francis kind of called it, but people making some assumptions regarding regarding Dave Hakstol. Now, first of all, I think it's interesting because, a lot of what I'm reading is, Ron Francis won't commit to Dave Hakstol long term. We already knew that. That shouldn't be breaking news. I know we certainly talked about it here on Locked On Kraken, but actually from the Seattle Times and the reporting that Jeff Baker has done, I think he read into what Ron was saying. And, I don't want to make this like every time someone maybe says or doesn't say something that it's not worth reading between the lines. And I think Jeff's statements before reading between the lines made a lot of sense. This seems a little bit clickbaity to me. I'm not saying from Jeff Baker, I'm saying overall, because I'm going to play you what Ron Francis said today. And I believe it was Jeff asking the question, but Jeff asks about the coaching staff, and then Ron Francis gives an answer. Then Jeff asks a follow-up, and Ron Francis basically says, you're going to read into it anyway. So I'm going to play you the full clip because I think context is important here. And it just seemed like context was missing on the interwebs. So I wanted to record this bonus episode before I got going with my other daily activities. Here's Ron Francis today from his effectively exit interview comments.
Have you made a decision yet on whether all the coaches are returning this season? And if so, what did you think about the job they did this year?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's part of the process we go through now, right? Like as I talked about earlier, meeting with the coaching staff, the management team, all that stuff, and assessing it. So we're still in that process now. There's certain things, and like I talked about the defensive aspect of the game, we were really good. So there's kudos for that. This was kind of a unique season, and that's where we kind of got to dig through. I mean, last season, everybody has injuries. I'm not using that as an excuse, but last year our first major injury happened after the All-Star break where Burakovsky tore his groin. Before that, we had guys out for one game, maybe two games. This year it was totally different in that regard. We lost Tanev in game one. He was out for like the next 12 games. Some things that we don't talk about, like Eberle ended up breaking his hand in game 4, but he continued to play for the next 6 weeks with a broken hand. We lost Burakovsky after game 6, and I think he played one game between then and December 29th. So there was a lot of things that affected our chemistry as a team and as a lineup. And I think we're being young, we're not at the point where we have some of those kids that were ready to step in and push. As you saw early in the season versus later in the season, it went a little bit better for them, right? So we're still there and develop that. So there's a lot of things we have to look at and factor in, and we'll continue to do that in the next few weeks.
So can you confirm at this point that Dave Hakstol is coming back next season, or you can't do that yet?
Well, you're going to read into it one way or the other, but this is the process we do every year, and that's what we're in right now.
So I'm going to leave it there for a minute. We're going to hear more from Ron. A few things that he talked about. He talked about this stat, and now I know why people are responding to a tweet that I sent, I don't know, 3-4 days ago. But top 9 in goals against. To me, watching the Seattle Kraken, that's not a defensive stat that most skaters should take any credit for. That's because of our goaltending. Okay, let's just be clear. We overwork our goalies. I said it. If you already listened to today's full episode, I already talked about this. So, I appreciate advanced analytics, predictive analytics, and saying someone is good based on the prediction that was spit out by a machine. That's not the same as comparing what happened and what didn't happen. And that's the thing. Predictive analytics give us the best shot to understand defense, but we've had Allison Lucan on how many times? There's not a good metric to measure defense. So yes, I am going off of the eye test. And I am a person who loves defense in every sport. And what I see is a team that, because we are not responsible at times, we are not hard workers at times, and that we're not that was weird. Hey, if I do this, does it show up again? Anyway, I don't know what's happening. That was weird. We're not responsible at times. We're not That's so crazy. I'm trying to figure out how to get it to come back. Do you see that little bubble popping up? Anyway, we're not responsible at times. We're not as hardworking as I think we can be at times. And that impacts how I perceive our defense, because defense is about preventing the other team from doing what they want to do. We're not always great at that. We scramble a decent amount. We react a decent amount. We give up opportunities that our goaltenders have to then clean up a decent amount. So maybe thinking, if you want to use analytics, then come at me with shot quality. Come at me with, shots faced. How many shots are our goaltenders? How many shots are getting all the way through? And where are we with that compared to the league? And I will tell you honestly, I don't know right now. I will tell you what I think. If I could use my eye test as a predictive analytic, I would say we're probably not top 10 when it comes to shots that our goaltenders physically had to touch, right? That's what's considered a save. And obviously the goals got past them. But how many shots are our goaltenders facing? Is that also low? Because to me, honestly, that's a better prediction of good defense, because, you're not giving teams an opportunity. But then you can't even stop there, because you can have a low amount of shots and still give up a lot of goals. But to me, that's not a defensive issue. That's goaltending. So again, how many shots are we seeing? How many shots are teams getting up against the Seattle Kraken versus how many shots are Seattle Kraken goaltenders saving? So listen, I hear what Ron is saying, and that stat is there, and it's considered a defensive stat. And so if you're trying to make things sound good, or you kind of have in your mind what you want the vision of the team to be, I understand why you would use those stats. I don't know how you watch this team and say that this is a top 10 defensive team. For me, that's not my metric of defense. My metric of defense is watching the games and seeing how many times our defensive players are in good position. How many times do our skaters create a situation where our goaltender has to move wide lateral across the crease? How many times are we giving up goals? So you can look at goals, but where are you looking at where the goals are shot? How many are high danger shots? Where do we rank in the NHL when it comes to that? How many are backdoor goals? I don't know if anyone actually keeps track of that, but that would be fascinating to me. And I don't think that all of those metrics align where the Kraken are top 10. I don't know if we're bottom 10 in all of them, but it's more than predictive stats. So I had to get on my soapbox here. The other thing I wanted to talk about, which is obvious, is more obvious, I think, is that to me, in hearing Ron Francis, I don't think he said anything different. He's non-committal, but he was non-committal months ago or a month ago when Jeff Baker wrote that article. That being said, just like I said about how he's pumping the stat that favors his team, he's going to lean into if the system is always the same. And I think he's absolutely right. I don't know things to be any different. You know, if the system is the same, then the system is the same. And so he can say we're in the middle of that process, and that's that. I would have to look back last year, but we got the announcement of the extension of Dave and Ron pretty soon after the season ended. So I'd have to look at the timing, when exit interviews were versus when those announcements were made. But the process is the process. And I think also, even if we put that aside and I think we dial down the salaciousness of, that's at least what I think. I think Ronnie didn't tell us anything that we didn't know. But there is also another piece here. I like that the team is looking at its coaching staff. I would like it even better if we're also looking at concrete metrics regarding our front office and the handling of the Seattle Kraken. Because again, I think there are things that we could do better and that we're going to have to do better. Ron in his comments also talked about the salary cap and looking for things in free agency. And he was very, again, non-committal regarding those things. But the season it just ended for the Kraken. We still have playoffs, and some teams are not really going to be hyper focused like we might be on the postseason. So, I think this is a time where you use the system that you have in place. You use the timeline that you usually do, the due diligence and the process. Yeah, take all the time that you need, because obviously we got to figure some things out. I don't agree with Ron on defense. I understand, and I understand advanced analytics. Thank you very much. I use them sparingly, especially on defense, for all the reasons that we already talked about. So what do we talk about? We look at quality start. Again, we look at heat maps. We look at game flow, right? We win games. We've won games as the Seattle Kraken where the other team had the majority of the flow. Because why? They're getting up shots. How do you get up shots? You have the puck, right? So yeah, those shots didn't turn into goals, but was that because Seattle Kraken defense was good or because Seattle Kraken goaltenders were excellent? I mean, I could go on, and I will in the off season, but I wanted to just come in here, chime in on my 2 cents. Coming up on this quick bonus episode, though, I want you to hear from Ronnie Francis about the feeder system. And, he had some interesting things to say about the feeder system. And Allison Lucan, just huge fan, friend of the pod, asks some interesting questions also regarding goaltending. Or I think it was Allison. Somebody asked about goaltending, so we'll hear Ron's response to that as well. All right, this is a little bonus episode breaking down my immediate reactions to Ron Francis, his media availability today, Monday, April 22nd. We already have a podcast up, including Kansas City Mavericks general manager and head coach Tad O'Had. And I tell you all the time, you've heard from Tad if you're an everydayer, and especially if you're a Locked On Kraken insider, then you know that Tad is very complimentary of the feeder system. And you're also going to hear Ron throughout his, I think he maybe spoke for about 20, 25 minutes, but throughout his media availability today, he talked a lot about the feeder system. So I want you to hear a little bit about that. Not specifically talking about the Mavericks, but again, they're a part of that feeder system. So here is Ron Francis again.
When we had the run we had last year and we got in the first round and beat the defending Cup champs and took the Dallas Stars to 7, the message was, don't think this is going to be easy next year because it's going to be harder. I think in some regards they heard that, but I don't know if they necessarily believed it. 1-4-1, I think, out of the gate is not really what I wanted to have from our guys coming in. So the message again was a little bit more stern this year in the sense that, hey, we can't have this happen again. We got to be ready from day one of camp, and we got to have a much better start than we had this season. We'll look at every angle. I mean, the beauty is we have the cap space, so we're going to look at free agents. We're going to look at possible trades with other teams, very much similar to what we did in year one. We have the draft capitals we talked about earlier to throw those into deals or move things. We have a lot of prospects that teams like. There's some we don't want to give up, and there's some we may have to if the right deal comes along. So we'll look at everything that we have to look at to try and make our team better. It's important for us to get back on the winning track, and our goal is to get back in the playoffs next year.
Hey, Ron, thanks for doing this. Do you think your farm system is sort of ahead of schedule maybe? So you've got so many breakout performances going on. Is it a little bit even surprising you all?
Well, I think it's credit to our amateur staff, right, and our development staff. These guys work extremely hard in finding talent and then drafting them and then developing them. So, last year in Coachella, we were one of the oldest teams. I think we're the third oldest team. This year we went to the 20th oldest team. We have a lot of our kids from our first draft and some from our second draft finally coming into the pipeline. And that team not only had a good year, it won the division, got a first round bye. So the exciting thing for me is for those kids is they're playing in a winning environment. They're learning how to win. They're going to get into tough playoff games. They're going to see what that's all about, and they're going to experience that.
Ron, you mentioned the improved save percentage this year. What can you say about what your tandem was able to accomplish and how important that is going forward?
Yeah, no, it was good. It was obviously disappointing to see Ruby get hurt again, but Joey stepped in during that window and played fantastic. Both guys, really from January 1 through the end of the season were really, really good for us. We feel comfortable with those two guys in our net moving forward. As I said, the defensive portion, the top 9, we were 9th in the league in defense goals against. So we feel good with 6 of those 7 guys under contract coming back. I thought the progression of Riker down the stretch was really good too. So, that part of the game we feel comfortable with and confident in. Now we have to go fix the forward group and make some tweaks to get the scoring back to where it needs to be.
I hear you, Ron. I hear you. And we do need to get the scoring to a better place. 6 of the 7 guys, though, and that goes to what I talked about on Monday's full episode, today's full episode of Locked On Kraken. Who do I think is in? Who do I think is out? From what Ron is saying right there, it's probably Justin. I would shop maybe, Borgen around, maybe Dumoulin if I really had to be a stickler. Jamie Alexiak, I don't think we need to worry about it anytime soon, but I'd be open to that as well. But what I will say is that Ron seems open to a decent amount, and it does sound like it's going to come through prospects or through draft picks. I think we can do better. I think that it sounds to me like he's maybe a little bullish on the defensive side, because those defensive stats for me don't belong to the defenders. They belong to our goaltenders. And honestly, there are some forwards that play better defense, consistent, hardworking defense. So, I don't know. But if our blue liners are getting the puck out of the net, the most effective and efficient, which is a stat I think that's worth looking at. I mean, There's a lot for me if that's the case, and I don't know that for sure. I'm mentioning this as a hypothetical, but I think you could make that argument for a decent amount of our defenders that they move the puck out of the zone very well. But is that what they should be doing? Is that what we need every single one of our Blue Niners to do? And yes, the answer is yes. And the answer is also, but in a perfect world, they wouldn't have to, right? Or not be the best at it. Being good and doing it versus us relying on our defenders to do that, that's different. To me, that's different. So yeah, I respect Ron. I don't agree with him on a decent amount of how he sees the defense and maybe even, what this roster construction is going to look like. But I'm not getting paid however much he gets paid. I'm a podcaster and I have opinions and I know hockey. I know sports pretty well. So I'm going to keep talking about him here. That's why I have a podcast, Locked On Kraken. But again, much respect for Ron. We see things a little differently. There are ways, I think, to accomplish what I think the focus of the team should be, or even as I understand Ron's vision of the team to be. I think there are multiple ways to get there. I just think that he and I have a different approach. But again, he's the big boss, or the GM at least. So ultimately, I trust him and that staff. And as I said earlier, I believe on this bonus episode, and I've been saying for a while, I think it's also worth evaluating. And maybe that becomes more of a salient point depending on how this upcoming season goes. But, what if the vision of what it takes to get this team to the playoffs is the wrong vision for this team as constructed? Then that's not a coaching, well, not only a coaching issue, that's a front office issue. I don't know. I think, though, this season makes all of those things fair game to put it on the table. So I think it makes it fair game. All right, those are my thoughts. Wanted to get out some quick thoughts. We're going to talk more about Ron Francis and Dave Hakstol's media availability in the next 2 days as we keep running through these. We'll know by tonight if the series with the Kansas City Mavericks continues or if the Mavs will get a little bit of rest before they start their second round series. But of course, we will talk about that on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Kraken. You know the drill. Be kind to yourselves. Be kind to one another. Hold fast. Stay true. Get fired up. And I still don't know what the charge is for the Mavericks. I meant to ask Tad. I really did. And he would have told me, I think. But I'll do some more recon on that. Kansas City Mavericks fans, if you've been to a game or two, you follow the team, let me know. I want to make sure I get the rally cry right. Either way, peace out, everybody. I'll catch you on the next episode.